Konnichiwa.
It's history in the making, and we want you to be part of it.
That's a given.
We're talking about people who are changing the game.
You guys have run a tight ship here. Oh my gosh.
The rock star sitting here.
I can't even describe it.
Talking about actual business.
Two beings at the top of their professions.
Started.
Lightning quick movements.
Changing the
Rock star sitting here. It's just started.
Welcome back to the Real Value Podcast, the podcast about real estate, lending, appraising, success, leadership, life, and, well, how it all fits together. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Blaine Feyen. I am your host for this and every episode of the Real Value Podcast, the podcast made for you by one of you. Now, by that, of course, I mean I am an appraiser, have been for many years. But I was also a realtor for several years, and I was also a lender. So I tend to think that I speak all the languages, if you will, of all the related professions. And the stuff we talk about in the podcast, I generally try to make universal and relatable to anybody and everybody. But of course, some of it is definitely appraiser and appraisal industry specific. Now, before we get into today's main topic, I wanted to dig into the Value Syndicate mailbag and answer a question from a listener. And the Value Syndicate is, of course, what I call our subscribers, who get the free bonus episodes that I put out occasionally. I try not to overload your email box, but every now and then I have what I call some bonus content or extra content that I feel would be really valuable but doesn't necessarily fit in with any particular episode, and I like to send that to our subscribers and our subscribers only. It is always free, so just head to Real Value Cast or realvaluegroup.com and you'll see the sign-up form to become part of the Value Syndicate. Nevertheless, from our subscribers, I get lots of email and private messages on Facebook, on Messenger. Of course, I always respond to every message that I get, but I don't always have time to answer them on the show. I always have some kind of intention to talk about these on the show, and I have done other shows on listener questions where I think if this is a question that I get a lot or it's a universal question that would value everybody, of course I bring it on. And this question has come up many times from many of our subscribers, and so I wanted to address it here so that I don't have to keep typing the same responses. But this one came from Bill, and the reason that Bill made it special is because what started out as a question about my day and a topic about scheduling effectiveness and efficiency in an office turned into a discussion more about the value of routine and of habit. And of course, we had a nice discussion about how I run my day or try to run my day, and some suggestions on how to structure and change a few things in his day to maybe make him a little bit more efficient and more importantly, more effective. But then, of course, we got onto this topic of routine, and we started chatting about my morning routine, which I realized, the light bulb went off, that because I feel like my morning routine is the foundation of my whole day, that this was the real value of the conversation. And so I wanted to share that with everybody. Not because I think it is anything special or I'm anything special, but Bill pointed out a few things that I took for granted that I felt was just, well, it's just what I do. But he felt that it was super valuable to share it and asked me to do so. And I thought, well, let's do it. So again, my morning routine, I don't think is anything special because I've been doing it for so long, but it is the foundation of, it helps set the foundation, I think, of how I think, feel, how I act, how I behave, how I deal with stress, how I deal with inputs throughout the day, how I deal with people, and of course, how I produce throughout the day. And I think my morning routine allows me a bit of freedom and productivity that I tend to think few have. And again, not that I'm anything special. I've just developed some of these habits over the years, and I've kind of whittled down the ones that work best for me and help me be who I want to be most days. And I think this is the most important idea, is the morning routine helps me be who I'm trying to be, who I want to be, who I have some goals of being. Now, my mornings typically begin usually between 5 and 6. And I say usually or typically because I do a lot of physical activity throughout the week. I play hockey 1 or 2 nights a week, depending on the league schedule, always on Monday night, sometimes on Thursday nights. So there are some nights that I definitely come home exhausted and a little beat up. Some phantom bruises here and there. I wake up the next morning and I'm just beat up. So my mornings after hockey nights may begin at 7 instead of 6, but it's generally not more than that. I typically am waking up between 5 and 6. It's just a question of whether or not I stay in bed until 7. But as I mentioned in other episodes, I also have 2 teenage boys in high school that are with me half of the week. I am a divorced single parent. I have a great co-parenting relationship with their mother, and she lives close. They live close. They come back and forth throughout the week as they please, so that's all great. And I generally like to wake up with them on the days that they're with me. Now, of course, they are, being teenagers, they're very self-sufficient. They set their own alarms. They get up. They shower on their own. I don't have to go in and wake them up unless I've been awake for an hour or so and I don't hear the showers going. Then I know they've slept through their alarms. But on most days, I don't have to do anything. They don't need my help getting ready for school. They make themselves breakfast, but it's awesome time for me to spend with them because I get up. Sometimes I'll make them breakfast, lunches, and then we just chat, and it's awesome time. Of course, as they're heading out the door, I give them both big hugs, big kisses, and tell them go make a difference in the world, change somebody's lives. They roll their eyes, and they are off to school. Once they leave, that's my time. The house is mine, and I typically then move right to sitting in meditation. I have a spot where basically all my activity occurs, and I go and I sit in meditation, and I try to shoot for anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, sometimes 15 to 30, depending on how I'm feeling. But I do it to get my breathing and my mind right. It's just part of my normal routine. Of course, sometimes I miss it. Life takes over, and I will miss meditating for a couple days. But as I've mentioned in I think a bonus episode that I sent the Value Syndicate on the value of meditation, I know if I've missed a couple days, I know that I've missed those days and I get right back to it. Of course, I have generally had some coffee already by then. I'm moving through my brainwave stages from deep sleep to waking to activity, and I'm trying to keep it in the light relaxation phase or waves as long as I can, and meditation helps me with that. And as I've mentioned in that bonus episode on meditation, and if you know anything about meditation, while you're meditating, you are, of course, not trying to focus. You're not trying to not think, so to speak, but you're not trying to focus on anything in particular, but maybe your breath during that time. Now, after meditation, I typically will jump right up. Well, I shouldn't say jump. I come out of meditation fairly slowly. I take a minute or so to stretch my legs because we sit in a cross-legged style with some pillows or small bench underneath your butt to kind of create a nice triangle, stable position. And I come out of meditation, I will stretch a little bit, and then I have a mountain bike on a fluid bike trainer 2 feet away from my meditation spot. And I will typically jump up, heat up my coffee, get my water ready, and then I jump on my bike. And I ride on the bike trainer for typically 20 to 30 minutes, minimum no less than 20 minutes. And again, if I'm feeling good, I will continue on for 30 minutes. Now, some days I do what are called intervals, high-intensity workout, HIIT, high-intensity interval training. So 2 or 3 days a week, I will burn on the bike. I'll warm up for 5 minutes, and then I'll do a burn session where I go as fast as I can for 30 seconds to a minute, and then off for a minute. And then on for a minute, off for a minute, and I'll do that typically 8 or 9 times until I'm just shredded. I'm burned, and there's sweat pouring all over. And then on the other days, my easy days are days where I will just ride for 20 to 30 minutes at a moderate pace, simply to sweat and burn some calories. And I love doing this in the morning, but it's the only type of working out that I like doing in the morning. I like pushing weights around. I like doing CrossFit-style workouts. I like burning my body, but I typically need to do that in the afternoon or the evening. So in the mornings are for coffee, meditation, sweating on the bike, and then some writing. Now, I don't need to talk about the fitness and the health benefits of meditating and riding on the bike. If I do, of course, email me, shoot me a message, and we will discuss it. But this is all universal knowledge that everybody should have. I am going to do a podcast on health and wellness in our industry and what I think is lacking, what needs to be done. Nevertheless, it's part of my life, and I do it. After meditation, after exercising a bit, after sweating, which helps me get rid of any latent stress that's hanging around from the previous day and whatever else, I'm feeling good now. It helps put my mind right, and it helps me stay and or get creative. When I'm on the bike for 20 to 30 minutes, I got headphones on, I have my iPad next to me, it's all hooked up, and I'm either listening to a podcast, I'm watching something, a TED Talk on YouTube, or I'm listening to a book on tape, Audible, which I almost never read or listen to fiction ever. I'm not imploring anybody else not to. I'm just saying it's just typically not my genre. I'm listening to some kind of self-help, some type of business, some type of management, leadership book, whatever. I'm an information whore, if you will, and that's all I do all day long is try to gather information and learn. So after I get off the bike, I'm still sweaty. I may still be actually breathing heavy. I sit down in my living room, which is 3 feet away from my bike, and I have my iPad in front of me with the attached keyboard, and I sit down and I just start writing. Sometimes I don't even have an idea or a plan of what I'm going to write about. Sometimes I do, but I just start writing. Sometimes it's developing my thoughts and ideas for the podcast, of course. Sometimes it's chapters for a book that I'm writing. Sometimes it's coaching and mentoring thoughts or practices that I want to employ, ideas I want to send out to certain people. Sometimes it's mastermind ideas, thoughts that bubble up from a previous meeting with somebody. And sometimes, folks, it's just sheer gibberish, meaning when I sit down, I know that the discipline of putting my fingers on the keyboard and just starting to write, it could be a diary that I start to write, but once I start writing, once I sit down, I turn on my computer or my iPad and I put my fingers on the keyboard and I force myself to come up with at least 500 words of something. It helps turn on something in my brain and unleash whatever's in there. It helps me connect, I would say, with whatever or wherever anybody else who likes to be creative connects with to get ideas. Let's call it the ether or whatever. I can't say that everything comes from within me. And I believe when we're disciplined about something, we tend to connect to let's call it a greater collective of minds and ideas, which is, by the way, the mastermind principle. So when we do this, when we employ this discipline, this practice, these things can come out of us. We're peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and new things come out. Now, I generally will write for about an hour or so, and then I close up the iPad, I grab some more coffee, I make a spinach protein smoothie or something like that, and then I get to work. Nope, I don't take a shower yet, if that's what you were thinking. I'm still in the same workout clothes. I'm still sweaty. I likely have my biking shoes still on, but I like to organize my day this way. And then, of course, after that, I take a shower. Now, maybe that's too much info for you, but I wanted to just emphasize the value of the routine and how it works for me. It's not for everybody. I get it. And not everybody needs it. Some people are great or work this way later in the evening hours when and if it comes to creating. Not everybody's creating. I personally, as I mentioned, I don't like working out in the morning other than jumping on the bike to sweat. I have a killer CrossFit style home gym in my garage that my whole family, including my girlfriend, my boys, work out in. We typically do that in the evenings. So I say all of this just to tell you and maybe encourage a few of you listening that there are enough hours in the day to get it all in. And more importantly, if you want to do, be, or have something else in your life, you have to make time to do it and then have the discipline to get it done. And discipline, by the way, comes from within. There's nothing outside of you that can give you discipline. It has to come from within, just like motivation has to come within. There's the myth of motivation that says that something outside of you will give you some kind of motivation, and then something outside of you will give you the discipline to seek that motivation, when in fact this is just a myth. Motivation is made up of two words, motives in action, and the motives have to come from within you, and then the action comes from or comes from within and exhibits itself outside of you. So your motives put into action is then defined as discipline, but it all has to come from within. People complain about not having enough time in the day to do the things that they want to do. They complain sometimes that they would love to do something else, some passion project. They would love to write. They would love to create. They want to create an Etsy account. They want to do some craft, whatever it is. You just have to figure out in your day how to create incremental improvements in efficiency and effectiveness. Maybe it means getting up an hour earlier. Maybe it means staying up an hour later. And by the way, I'm not a Gary Vaynerchuk, hustle, stay up for 19 hours a day and burn your face off. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying with a little bit of effectiveness and a little more efficiency, making incremental improvements to each hour of your day, you will find you can scrape out a very effective 1, 2, or 3 extra hours a day with a little bit of motivation and discipline. My routine works great for me. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to work well for you, but I absolutely would love to hear what does work for some of you. I'd love to hear your comments below this episode at Real Value Cast. Just put your comments in the website. You can, of course, go to the Facebook page, the Real Value Podcast Facebook page. It's small at this point. We just started it a couple months ago, but feel free to head over there, comment on there, or in any of the other forums that we tend to see each other in and have discussions in, the 100% group or any of the others. I would love it if you'd pass along some of the podcasts in there and have discussions in there about it. So with that being said, let us get on to the meat of today's topic. This week, we're going to chat about leadership. It's one of my passion topics. Been studying on it for decades now. And I mean, we talk about leadership often in these podcasts, even if I don't actually use the word leadership. But of course, anytime we talk about being a better you, like we just talked about with my morning routine, building a better business, understanding the world around you a little bit better, at the core, we're talking about leadership. Leadership is, again, what I refer to as a passion topic of mine, not because I necessarily see myself as a leader or aspire to be a leader in some particular area, but because I have learned from some of the best in the world that on any given day and in any given activity, we're really only ever being one of 3 things. We're being a leader in some particular thing, we're being a follower, or we're standing still. There really is no other options. By the way, to all the listeners who are working for somebody else, I strongly encourage you to see yourselves as future leaders within the organization and not just followers of the leaders of that organization. I've made the claim, however controversial in the past, that most appraisal organizations don't have any leadership within them. I'm not talking about necessarily the sole proprietor, although a lot of those we could say there's no leadership within them. But even bigger organizations, leadership is a topic that is lacking across almost every industry and profession, but is certainly lacking in the appraisal industry. So if you're working for somebody else, this is where I encourage you to step up, think of yourself as a future leader, and of course, help out the leadership or lack of leadership in your particular organization. The particular topic about leadership, of course, is big enough for a whole episode on its own. But until then, just know that how you see yourself and the actions you take are far more important than your title. You may not have the title of chief appraiser or owner or manager or whatever, but think of yourself as future leader, not follower. So when I use the word follower, I'm not referring to anybody who is not the leader of their company, because not everybody in every company is being a follower. When I use the terms leader, follower, or standing still, I'm referring to the state of mind, a belief system, if you will, and an attitude than more so than a position or a title. Now, I've worked for organizations, I'm sure many of you have as well, where the employees exhibited more leadership than maybe the owners or the titled heads and leaders of the organization because of their attitudes and the actions that they take. And I've also been part of organizations where I was a follower. I was a follower of a particular individual's vision, skills, and methodology because I was a leader in training, which is what this week's episode is all about. Now, I wrote about this topic, and I've done several podcast episodes on this back in, I want to say 2014, 2015, for one of the other podcasts that I've talked about, my Aikido podcast. And I've been teaching on this topic for well over 20 years, based on my experience in the live-in student program that I took part in back in the 90s. And the leadership lessons and the seeds that were planted while taking part in that program have been, I'll use the word manifesting. They've kind of been, they were planted, they've been fertilized through life experience. They've been manifesting and evolving every day since then, which, by the way, is, I would say, one of the benefits of studying under a great leader. They plant seeds. You may not be ready to hear or experience something at the time, but they're in there. When everything you see and hear goes into your brain, your subconscious gets stored somewhere. It just needs to be fertilized by somebody else, something you hear, see, do, and then it comes out later. And I've been experiencing these seeds that were planted many, many years, sometimes decades ago, that continue to kind of manifest and evolve and come out. And I see it. And I was super fortunate to have had the experience I had back in my early 20s. And although I was like too young and without enough relative life experience to understand fully what I was getting at the time, I would say I was fairly cognizant of the fact that it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience to study under such an individual, to study leadership in what I consider to be its highest form, which is typically referred to as servant leadership. Now, if you've heard this term before, I want to congratulate you, and I hope that you're actively practicing what we're going to call servant leadership. There's a whole topic out there. If you Google servant leadership, you can find lots of information. It became a popular kind of management and leadership topic to write about years ago, but of course it's been going on for thousands of years. Now, if you've never heard the term before, I'd like to offer you one of my stories of how I would say, introduced to this philosophy, but introduced hardcore Japanese style. Basically, when one is a committed student of a particular art, skill, or practice, you may choose to, or you may get invited to follow or travel to see your teacher teach to others. Of course, in a martial art, in Zen, in calligraphy, and a variety of other arts, on occasion, if you're lucky, you'll have the opportunity to travel with your teacher, who in this case is often called the sensei, at least in Japanese arts. You'll have the good opportunity to travel. You might be invited by the instructor to travel with them to another school, maybe another town, maybe a weekend seminar or workshop or something. You might be going to take part in the training yourself, but you may also be asked to go along with the teacher, to help the teacher in some way, like an assistant. In the martial arts specifically, there are two sides to every training experience, because there's always one person who, let's call it, makes the attack. They do the punch and the kick, and then the other person gets to practice the particular technique on that attacker. Now, the attacker, at least in Japanese martial arts, is called the uke, U-K-E, the uke. And the one doing the technique to the attacker is called the nage, N-A-G-E, uke and nage. More appropriately, the one receiving the energy and learning how to take the falls is called the uke. It's uke breaks down as the one who receives. So they're the one who does the attack, but they're the one who then gets the technique applied to them. And the one doing the throw, again, is called the nage, the one giving the energy. And this is an important distinction, even for those who have never done martial arts or have any intention of doing martial arts, because in martial arts, especially in Aikido, there is a whole separate art and philosophy to being uke. And when I say philosophy, meaning it has a lot of value to how one leads their life and runs a business and relationships and everything else, because you're learning to receive energy, do something with it, and turn it into something greater. Because again, the uke is the one who receives the energy and takes the falls. You're not just being I'll call it a technique dummy for the person practicing. You're actually learning how to take punishment, take energy into your body, maybe do a flip or be flipped, have your wrist cranked, you're getting thrown to the mat. You have to take care of your own body while this is going on, and then you pop up from the mat, better for the experience, and potentially having grown. And of course, this is an extremely dumbed down explanation of this whole process. But it was often taught by my teacher that you learned more as the person taking the falls for your partner or for the teacher than you might learn being the one doing the throwing, because you are getting thrown around and taking some punishment, and you are learning to feel through your whole sensing mechanism, which is your body. You're learning to feel through your body the unspoken aspects of the technique. So the teacher can only express so much verbally, and we can only learn so much verbally. Only so much can go into our ears. Our brain can only cognitively accept or rationally accept so many parts of a lesson, step 1, 2, 3, more than 3 steps, and we tend to lose it and we tend to forget. And also when you're training something physical like a martial art, you don't want to be stuck in your head. You want to just do. You want to practice and maybe have your technique tweaked every now and then by the instructor, but you don't want to be logically stuck in your brain. So when you're getting thrown around and taking some of the punishment, you're learning through your whole body these unspoken aspects of the technique. You get to feel the power of the person applying the technique. You get the opportunity to flow with the movements, again, to protect your own body. And you get to learn without having to use your ears, your eyes, and your brain in the same way that, let's say, traditional learning requires. It's like the difference between somebody saying that they love you versus having that same person grab you, look you in the eyes, squeeze you tight, give you a big kiss, a tight hug, and showing you through their physical and emotional actions that they love you. One of those experiences is a somewhat intellectual one, a rational one you take in through your eyes and ears. They say, yep, I love you. While the other is an emotional, full-body experience. One of them is more likely to have a long-lasting, if not lifelong, impact, the physical one, while the other one potentially dissipates rather quickly. People can say things and we go, yeah, whatever. But when they show us and they do it and you feel it physically, it lasts. Of course, the one that dissipates is the verbal expression, where the one that was expressed with some kind of physical interaction, backed by some real emotion, is the one that lasts a lifetime and has the biggest impact. In the Aikido example I just gave, when you're the one being thrown around, you are receiving energy through your body, and you're learning how to translate it, how to absorb it, and how to transform it into useful, positive energy that benefits you and your partner. You're learning how to take care of yourself. You're taking responsibility for you, even in this potentially hostile scenario or situation. Of course, your partner isn't hostile to you. They're friendly and they want you to pop up from the mat and be okay. They don't want to harm you, but the idea, the theory is that this is an attack and defense scenario. And so you're learning to take care of yourself. You learn how to take the falls. You learn how to get beat up a little bit. You learn how to roll around and roll out of things. You get your arms and your legs twisted up, but you still pop up off the mat a little better for the experience and ready to give your partner good quality, hardcore energy again. And what you're also learning when you're the uke, again, the uke is the one doing the attacking and the one taking the falls and the throws and the punishment, is that without you, there's no true practice and no opportunity for growth for either party. Without you, one person is just practicing in the air. They're just punching in the air and practicing with no partner. And without you being the uke, the one doing the attack and taking the falls, your partner has nobody to practice the other side of the technique on or with. So that's the uke-nage relationship in Japanese martial arts. And I wanted to set that stage, if you will, to explain how this idea of leadership and learning through sacrifice is taken to the next level. So let's go back to your instructor inviting you along. As I mentioned earlier, when somebody's a committed student of a teacher and one places themselves in the apprentice role under the mentor's guidance, you'll have the opportunity to travel with your teacher. Now, if you're a student of the Japanese art of, let's say, ikebana. Ikebana is the art of flower arranging, or chanoyu, which is the art of the tea ceremony, if you've ever seen that. Or a student of a particular martial art like Aikido or Karate, these opportunities come up, and a student, sometimes many students, are either asked by the teacher or the student already knows that this is their role, to go with the teacher on their travels. And again, it could be simply traveling across town to another school, some kind of workshop where the teacher might be teaching or speaking. It could be traveling to another country for several weeks while the sensei travels around teaching, conducting seminars, conducting business, whatever it might be. Now, in my case, my teacher was the founder of a very large martial arts and Zen organization with schools literally all around the world. So as a live-in student, you basically had signed up for this opportunity to travel with the teacher on these excursions, either because the instructor needs a good uke, remember the one doing the attack and taking the falls, and the instructor, when they're teaching to be super effective, likes to have somebody who knows their style, knows what they need, can read their facial expressions, because quite often you're sitting there on your knees in the middle of the mat while the instructor is talking to the group, and then you have to know the unspoken signals of when to stand up, when to attack, what to do, how much to give, and all these things. And you learn that over time with your instructor. So the instructor sometimes needs this person to travel with them to demonstrate the best that they can, to demonstrate proper technique to the seminar participants, or simply to help out with the itinerary, carry the instructor's bags, make the coffee, maybe keep the sensei company during the off times, etc., whatever it may be. Now, this duty in Japanese is referred to as otomo, O-T-O-M-O, otomo. Otomo in Japanese translates literally as friend, but in the martial arts world, otomo means something far beyond friend. Now, as a live-in student, you are to some degree an otomo, or acting as otomo, for your sensei at all times. In fact, this is a big part of signing up for a program like this. When you sign up and you're accepted to be mentored in this type of program, whether you know it at the time or not, you're signing up to be the personal assistant to likely a very demanding and sometimes cantankerous person. In my case, that was the situation. But you're also signing up to be the absolute best, or get, I should say, the absolute best leadership training in the world through, again, something called servant leadership. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but that's absolutely what we were receiving, because we were serving to an extreme extent. I've talked about it before, 18, 20-hour days where you were just giving. But what we were experiencing and practicing was servant leadership. And I had the occasion many times to be otomo for my instructor, Mr. Toyota, on several trips, both in the U.S. and internationally. And the otomo is traditionally the one who travels with the sensei and tends to their needs, again, carries the bags, opens the doors, so on. And at the time, as a 21 or 22-year-old kid, which I was, I had very little experience doing this kind of task. So it was always, I would say, a nerve-wracking endeavor because, again, he was very, very demanding. He was well-known, famous in that world, all around the world. And here you are traveling as the assistant for them. People looked at you as much as they looked at them. But fortunately, I had gotten good advice and advanced instruction from one of the other much more experienced live-in students, and it was a roommate of mine at the time, who taught me about the role of the otomo, how to be a good otomo, which is basically how to be a good servant leader. And what I learned is that the otomo is to be more than just a slave who carries the bags. The role of otomo is one that carries with it extreme responsibility as well as opportunity to grow, and one that I credit for some of the greatest growth opportunities that I've had over the past 30 or so years. What I learned is that being otomo, traditionally, you are the one who walks behind the sensei, carrying the bags, but you're also expected to be a protector, a bodyguard of sorts, should somebody confront the sensei. So even though the sensei was more experienced at martial arts than the otomo, it was just expected that the otomo would sacrifice his or her own safety to protect the teacher. Basically, you'd throw your body in front of an attacker, whether you were better at martial arts than your instructor, likely not. But you would sacrifice yourself. And this kind of relationship, of course, meant that there had to be tremendous trust between the two, as well as tremendous respect for the teacher by the otomo. And if the respect wasn't there, the sensei would know this, would recognize this ahead of time, and know that the otomo would likely be lax or slow in his or her duties to protect the sensei, and maybe deliberately slow to respond in an attack and leave the teacher vulnerable. So you could basically infer from just witnessing an otomo do his or her duties that there was an implied trust and respect between the sensei, the teacher, and this person, the otomo, because the lack of either one of those traits would immediately exclude one from being chosen for this role. Meaning if you see the otomo, you know the person walking behind the instructor carrying their bags is otomo, you can see right then and there that the person doing that in that role is highly respected by the instructor, because the instructor knows implicitly that this person will lay down their life, so to speak, for the sensei, and vice versa. So I remember on many occasions making jokes myself and hearing comments from others that we were basically the slaves for Toyota Sensei, since the people looking at us, they only knew what they saw, which was typically the Otomos carrying the bags, or Mr. Toyota's briefcase, his shoes, maybe both. You're taking almost all the falls, all the abuse during a week-long seminar, and you're responsible for your sensei's uniform, washing it in the evening, taking care of his weapons, handling the paperwork and the money at the event, sitting at the registration table, yet also knowing what your instructor needs and what they're doing. You're getting the sensei's tea, you're rubbing his feet when they get sore, you're making sure his beer never gets below a certain point at the end of the evening. Anything else that needed to be handled in those settings, your job was to be on top of it 24/7. So those are just a few of the roles of the Otomo, though. The other role was also to be somewhat of I'll call it a social go-between. Being a sensei, at least of the caliber of Toyota Sensei, meant that their time was very valuable and most likely also in demand. There are people who want and wanted to engage in conversation with the sensei that the sensei may have no interest in talking to, or no time, or they don't want their energy sapped. They only have so much of it to give. They're going to give it on the mat while they teach. They're typically teaching for 6 to 8 hours a day, and they don't have time for chit-chat. And by the way, Japanese men of this caliber typically have no interest in minor chit-chat. The Otomo, in these instances, was to be there to place him or herself in between these types of engagements and save the sensei from having to engage in small talk, maybe discuss mundane topics or things that might be boring to the teacher. I know it sounds odd, but this was a common thing. And also not to be questioned about technical aspects or secrets of a particular art. Now, of course, I don't think Toyota Sensei had any fears of revealing these supposed secrets, but there were tons and tons of people who would approach him on the street or on the way into a dojo when we traveled who just wanted to, almost like a rock star. They wanted to touch him. They wanted to talk to him. They wanted to ask him about techniques, and they wanted access to a person like this. And it's the job of the Otomo to save him so as to protect his time, his availability, and his energy. And so we would have to kind of step in between and be the interpreter and say, I'm sorry, but Toyota Sensei has to get dressed real quick or has a meeting and whatever. And we would kind of be the wall between Toyota Sensei and anybody else. Now, of course, Toyota Sensei didn't require any of us to necessarily be his protector, although there were a couple times I remember being scolded by Toyota for not stepping between a person casually, say, walking into his office or somebody looking for him at the front office, and we would think nothing of it. And again, that was a situation where they wanted access to him, and they could have been anybody. And he would yell at us and say, that could have been an assassin. He was joking, of course, but he was telling us that our awareness had dropped, and we hadn't stepped in between, and this was an opportunity for us to grow and be better. So in a sense, if you worked for Toyota Sensei, which I did at a point in my tenure there, you were to a degree, as I mentioned before, Otomo, even when you weren't traveling. You were expected to keep his business private, protect his privacy, not let people pass a certain point in the dojo, and of course, all the typical daily duties like getting coffee, carrying his briefcase across the mat, put his shoes in the shoe rack, get whatever he needed, and kind of always have your ears and eyes perked for being there ahead of time, providing what was needed before he had to ask for it. And it was the job of the Otomo to serve, to always be alert for opportunities to serve, again, before he needed your services. And this is the huge lesson and the huge part of being Otomo, because the sensei wouldn't always point out what he needed or ask for something that would send you running. He wouldn't always say, Blaine, get me coffee. You had to be alert for the opportunity to have it there presented on his desk, steaming hot, before he sat down. No, the job of Otomo, the job of a good leader, is to see things before they are seen or perceived by the others. and to jump at opportunities before they are recognized by everybody else in the room, especially the sensei in this specific example. And sometimes your job as otomo was to create new opportunities that possibly didn't exist, or at least were not perceived prior to that. And that's what leaders do, which is what allows them to lead. Leading implies being out front of a situation, and it also implies having followers. There's a saying in the leadership community: a leader with no followers is merely taking a walk or merely out for a walk. Now, this to me was one of the greatest lessons of the whole Otomo training experience. Not only did we get to travel with this gentleman, we got to carry his bags, we got to be privy to business, very high-level business conversations and meetings. We got to see him plan his takeover of the world, so to speak, where he was going to open new schools, how he networked and how he implemented and all of this stuff. You got the opportunity to be always vigilant and aware of any impending event, which could be something as simple as hearing Sensei coming up the stairs from his basement office, trying to determine what was needed so that you could get it ahead of time or get there before you actually needed. And if Sensei had to call for you, you were too late. You didn't perceive what it was he needed. Now, I know this sounds odd. You're not asked to be psychic in these examples, but you're asked to always be aware for opportunities. And if he had to ask for something or tell you to do something, you were too late. And if somebody else saw the same thing as you, again, you were too late. It's kind of like if you both see a spider crawling across the mat and you know you have to get the spider off the mat, you should have seen it before somebody else. That was your role. And if the sensei's tea wasn't on his desk before he arrived, or his coffee, you were too late. If he has to ask for it, you're too late. If Sensei's beer got to the bottom of the glass and you hadn't kept it filled, you failed. The Sensei was dead. Not really, of course, but that was the meaning behind this kind of training. Always being hyper-aware and hyper-vigilant for opportunity. And in this case, the opportunity was in taking care of and protecting this one individual so that they could go on the next day and transmit their education to the greater population that they were teaching to. But the greater lessons, which were always being pointed out to us by the sensei, was that these little things were doing, what these little things were doing were representative of the universe of possibilities out in the world. That's what he was teaching us. Either the possibility of some kind of danger that we always had to be on the lookout for, and by the way, danger could mean a problem in your business, a potential for failure, or being aware of and on the lookout for the potential for innovation, success, creativity, new business opportunities, new relationships, or whatever we were able to perceive due to our heightened awareness to these opportunities. And all of this from serving somebody else. That's what servant leadership is. And this concept was, of course, totally foreign to me at the beginning. I thought I was a slave. I mean, that's kind of what we laughed about is you're just a slave for the sensei, and we get it. But we signed up for it, and we were paying for that opportunity. It was very foreign to me at the beginning, and everyone who has experienced it, of course, gets used to it. I didn't realize the value of the training and what it had on everything else I did until, of course, I finished the program. I came back home, and I started my own dojo, and I started working in leadership positions professionally. And when I had the opportunity to begin leading and developing others around me, and of course, developing my students in the Zen and the Aikido world, it all started to become crystal clear just how valuable this servant leadership model was and the extreme value my experience as a live-in student was having for me in life, in relationships, in communication, and in business. And it became especially clear once I started my own live-in student mentorship program at the dojo. And I was always trying to instill in them the same sense of caretaking, not for my own ego, but for the value that it has on negating one's own ego and expanding one's awareness in all directions. The job of the live-in student, and at one point we would have at any one time, we had space for 6 people, and at any one time you'd have 6, but there were times where we had more than 6 live-in students, either because of summer live-in student programs or things we had going on. So you had 7, sometimes 6 to 8 people, maybe 10 people you were directing who had signed up for your leadership on a full-time basis, living in the dojo, and your job was to give them tasks and projects and pique their awareness and show them where they're failing and doing all this stuff 24/7. And so when I started my own live-in student program, of course, now I was in charge of the leadership development of all these other people and being able to point out to them how to negate their own ego in the service of somebody else was immense leadership training. And being otomo for one's sensei, or even considering oneself to kind of have that role, is a whole other level of training beyond what takes place on the mat. It expands the realm of training from the, let's call them determined and somewhat narrow parameters of the martial arts mat space, this kind of sterile world of martial arts training where everything is somewhat contrived. And it expands it out to the whole world in a sense, because it gives the otomo, this slave, if you will, the servant leader, the opportunity to have something to focus on besides themselves and their own technique. So they start to see themselves in this role, not just taking care of me, the sensei, or me taking care of my sensei. They start to feel this way with every student they train with, regardless of whether or not they were inferior in rank to the person they're working with or superior in rank. They were to always see themselves as a servant leader. And although I didn't see it at the time, the effect that role was having on me was profound, and that it was teaching me more about leadership and the real role of a leader than being in a position of authority would or could ever teach me. Now, there was a movement in the leadership arena in the last probably 30 years or so, taking an ancient concept and applying it to the modern day corporate realm. And again, it was called servant leadership. It was given a name. And the concept of servant leadership basically entails what one would infer from the term, that the leader sees him or herself not as an autocratic and dictatorial bully, if you will, or an order giver, but instead one who is in a position to serve a greater good, to serve as well as develop those within the organization, to have goals and a mission that extends beyond just making a profit, and to take the moral high ground in all situations. And one of the most important qualities of the servant leader is that they see building up others around them at all levels, and the leaders in their midst as paramount to their own success. Meaning, if they are not building up others around them, they are not succeeding. They add it to their definition of success. In fact, one of the core beliefs of a good servant leader is that everybody is a leader or a teacher waiting to be developed. I said it earlier in the episode. For people who are working within an organization, just because you don't have the title of leader, manager, whatever it might be, vice president, president, always be thinking of yourself as a leader in training. And one of the core beliefs of a good servant leader is that everybody has within them these leadership qualities, or in the martial arts world, it's a teacher waiting to be, every student is a future teacher waiting to be developed. They just need the right person and or persons to help them reveal, uncover, peel back the layers of the onion. Of course, some never reach their potential. Some become suited for other things, better things, but the servant leader takes the approach. Again, like the law of the onion that I spoke in one of the bonus podcasts, everybody just needs some of the layers peeled away to reveal the leader, the teacher, the creative, the business owner, or whatever they are to be, the more evolved you, if you will, within everybody. And again, much like a good martial arts instructor who recognizes that the greatest compliment is a student who goes on to be an instructor themselves and potentially exceeds or surpasses the sensei in ability. And by the way, this is the extreme 1% of teachers that feels this way. Most of the teachers in any, whether it be martial arts or anywhere, tend to have some ego, especially in the martial arts. Some ego behind them where they think, I'm the best and I don't want anybody surpassing me. The top 1% or maybe 1% of 1% actually look to their students and go, the greatest compliment to me would be if you went on to be a teacher yourself, basically transmitting all of these lessons to others and carrying this on. And if you surpass me, the teacher, in ability, and to be able to put your own ego aside and say, I want that for you. I'm going to give you everything I've got, and then you're going to take it and expand and be better than me. And only the most humble and visionary of teachers, of leaders and mentors are able to not only see and understand that potential scenario, but then to treat his or her students, his or her employees, his or her apprentices with an expectation that they will for sure surpass you. I don't think I need to tell you that this takes real ego management. And we're going to talk about this in an episode that I'm going to call So You Want to Be a Mentor. I've already done an episode called So You Want to Be an Appraiser, where I talk about how to be a good apprentice. We're going to talk about this aspect in So You Want to Be a Mentor, because I don't see a lot of it going on. I know there are some great mentors teaching the tactical and practical and the technical in our business, but not necessarily good servant leaders. This takes extreme ego management. And it takes having a vision for others that goes way beyond what the student can see for themselves. Not just in the martial arts, but in almost every business setting around the world. It's not uncommon to have, again, very insecure leaders, teachers, managers, always on the lookout for those who might be coming up and nipping at their heels. And then, of course, looking for ways to keep them down out of fear that they're going to surpass their own manager, their own leader, the vice president, whatever. They're gunning for their position. So these leaders, in this case, we're calling them leaders loosely. They're more interested in keeping others down and holding on to their title and position than they are in building up other people and potentially revealing somebody who might be even better at what they themselves are doing. The servant leader, really any good and true leader, in my opinion, we're calling it servant leadership. I just call it leadership, and I think that's the way people should start to see it, because I think that's a true leader is somebody who's already a servant leader. I don't think we need to call it servant leadership anymore. It should just be within the definition of leadership. But the servant leader, any true leader, tries to see the potential in everybody, and they recognize that there are likely those in their midst, maybe in their employment, or under their guidance, under their mentorship, that could succeed them and do a better job than they're doing. But the true leader, the servant leader, has no fear of this, because that's exactly what their mission is. Remember, it's part of their definition of leadership. They put people and principle above everything else. Now, I read several books on this topic of servant leadership back in my 20s and later over the years. And as a vice president of one organization and then shortly after that, president of another, I was able to take part in several weekend workshops, kind of high-level coaching, training, seminars for business owners and leaders on how to be a servant leader, a strategic coach, and some other things like that. And I found the concept to be very compelling at the time, and I also found it well-suited to my personality, to the way I thought, and to the training and experience that I got being mentored by Toyota Sensei. It seemed to suit, again, my personality, and I found this whole concept, I'll use the word resonated. It resonated with me for several reasons. Now, one of the reasons being that after being part of the martial arts world for a couple decades by that point, I didn't relate well with what I would call unmotivated individuals, or people who needed to be managed and given discipline. I would often get calls from people to my martial arts school, and they would say, yeah, I want to get into the martial arts because I need to get some discipline. And unfortunately, that told me right away they were never going to come in, and I'll tell you why. Discipline comes from within. You cannot be given discipline. Somebody can be taught discipline, but understand discipline, like motivation, can't be given to you. If you're looking outside of you for something that's going to get you off the couch and out to the garage gym or in your car to drive to the gym or to stop eating, whatever it is, if you're looking outside of you, you're always going to be disappointed because you'll never find it. Discipline comes from within, just as motivation needs to. Motivation is made up of two words, motives in action. And the motives need to come from within you, and the action needs to come out of you. That's what motivation is. So I didn't relate well with what I'd call unmotivated people and people who needed to be given something or managed. I had done it. I would say I was fairly good at managing and motivating people in a task-based world with timelines and definable, measurable outcomes. But I don't say I don't think I was very good with those who I perceived that didn't have much drive to excel or be anything other than what I felt was average or mediocre, which, by the way, is most people. I prefer now today, and I preferred then, to exist in and be surrounded by people who were far more driven and able to set their own goals, create their own motivation, had their own discipline, develop their own timelines, create their own inner drive to succeed without some kind of carrot and stick being used to motivate them. So this concept of servant leadership had some value in the world that I was working in at the time because the model emphasized cooperation, collaboration at all levels. It emphasized trust, empathy, and an ethical and a moral, not to mention judicious, use of one's power, title, and authority. And again, it emphasized that the top leadership was always building up other leaders. They had no fear whatsoever of somebody kind of overtaking them. They appreciated that. They looked for it. So how does this apply in the real estate world, you ask? Well, it's actually quite simple. Yet, I'll say one of the most difficult things to learn due primarily to human nature and to our egos. Although I've been using my martial arts experience to a large degree as a way to express my thoughts on leadership in this episode and in prior episodes, I've also been using this concept in my businesses as well. This idea of service to others and being a leader at the same time became ingrained in me through those prior experiences. I've gone into every business I've been a part of since that time with an eye for developing talent and raising up others. Now, I'm not willing to say that it was always out of some high-minded ideal. It was in some cases simply because I was able to put my ego to the side and look to others and go, you know what? These people are far better at doing these tasks than I am. Let's build them up and have them do it. Now, I think this is part of just good business. Being in a room with people who are much smarter and much better than you, as opposed to being the smartest person in the room. This is just good, smart business. So there are times where I had ulterior motives, but it worked well for everybody because the people that I was helping to build up or put into positions where they could do the thing or run that task or run that division better than I could was good for them as well if they wanted to be there. So again, I don't say it to boost my own ego. It's big enough as it is, the idea. And I say it because I learned relatively early just how successful an organization can be when those in power, those in management, those with titles, and those in leadership positions are always seeking to help others reach their goals. It's one thing to focus on the numbers. It's one thing to make sure everybody's hitting their quotas. I know I've worked for companies, I've developed companies, and I've helped companies who look at the bottom line, they look throughout every division, and they look at quotas. We need to hit these numbers. They got sales goals, they got cost goals, they got all these quotas, whatever they may be in that organization. But it's a whole other thing to look at each individual as a future leader, a future manager, a future division head, potentially a future independent business owner, or whatever they may develop into, thanks to your help, guidance, tutelage, mentorship, and vision. You see, it does nobody any good to keep others where you need them. If they have more in them than what even they see, I believe it's incumbent upon you to help them see it and help develop them in that area, even if that means moving them out of your organization. I've been in a position many times, mostly in the mechanical contracting business, but also, of course, in the appraisal business, where helping somebody see that they would be a much better independent business owner than they would have been a number 2, number 3 person within my organization helped them on their way. We gave them the tools, the ideas, helped them write the business plan, in essence, helped them become our competition. But of course, they didn't. Because when you do this, one of two things happens. Either you unveil and unleash massive potential in others that, of course, may end up being extremely useful and helpful to you in your organization, should they decide to stay. And by the way, most will, because they're so thankful that you helped them become what they're becoming. Or you help unveil and unleash massive potential in them that is beneficial somewhere else and to somebody else, and keeping them around in your organization and for your own benefit means you potentially have people around you that are not at their full potential ever. This is what I want you to, I want it to sink in. Because part of being a servant leader is helping people reach their full potential and recognizing that when they don't, they are not being the full them and you're not getting the full benefit. They may seem happy. They may be grateful for what you give them or allow them to do, the position you have for them, but you aren't really helping them grow, which, in my opinion, should be one of the main goals of every organization. We know it's not, but it should be one of the highest goals, next to giving. Even if you help somebody grow out of your company and help them on their way to what they're truly good at, what they're truly passionate about, and more useful, allowing them to realize their full potential, you've helped develop another human being. And by the way, you've likely created a powerful ally in your expanding circle, whether that's business, personal, network, whatever it might be. This, by the way, as an aside, is one of the reasons that I talk all the time about networking with, developing courses for, and being an asset to and a resource to realtors and lenders. Because by doing so with no expectation of return, you are helping somebody grow and develop, and you are building a powerful ally in your business network. Now, in real estate sales, being a realtor, and the lending business, this means looking at things besides just numbers. This means helping agents, helping LOs develop into or out of the business. Now, I've said it often regarding the appraisal business. If I can help somebody out of the appraisal business because they realize it's just not for them, if through questions, if through discussion, I've had people in my mastermind group who in going through it realize, you know what? This is not my passion. Which means there's always a block, an energy block. There's always going to be a wall. They loved the ideas. They wanted to put a lot of stuff into play, but they realized they always they die out. They lose energy. Why? Because it wasn't their passion. So then we shift focus to, well, what is your passion? Let's help you find it. Let's help you develop a business around it, and let's help get you there. If I can help somebody out of the appraisal, out of the real estate, out of the lending business because they realize it's not for them, it's like earning a Boy Scout merit badge, and I am doing my good deed for the week. I haven't created more business for myself. I've helped another human being realize more of their own potential and move closer to what they may possibly be best at. And I've said it before. Sometimes I say it sarcastically in forums or whatnot. Maybe it's time for you to move on, and it might be the best decision you ever make to save your own life. Because of the stress and the anger and whatever else that you have towards this or any other business, sometimes that's an indicator. You're setting yourself up for a heart attack. You may save your own life by asking the right questions. And in the appraisal business, this, of course, has huge benefits in how we mentor our apprentices. If you look to the apprentices just in how much they can, say, do for you. You know, I talked in that episode about becoming an appraiser, or becoming a good apprentice, that you should be looking at what you can do. But in essence, I never used the words. In that episode, I was imploring, I was asking, I was demanding that future apprentices become servant leaders. They look for how they can help the mentor. But now I'm speaking to the mentors. If you just look at how much they can do for you, I've seen people in forums say, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I'm overwhelmed, I need an apprentice. You may cut a little of your workload in the near term. You may pick up some extra business. They can maybe help organize your office and take a little load off. But until you look, unless you're seriously thinking about helping them and helping them develop into their full potential, which means potentially out of your business, by the way, and into their own, we know that this happens all the time, you will always be fighting against an unforeseen force in the universe, which is the natural inborn human drive to expand and experience more than we are being or experiencing on any given moment. We all have it within us. Most people never realize it because we tamp it down. We learn not to look for more. We learn not to be more because it's too painful to look out into the world and go, gosh, I'm not experiencing that. I don't have this. I can't be this. Well, I'll just stay where I am, which is mediocre at best. It's a natural inborn human drive to expand. Now, I'm not saying everybody has this naturally oozing out of them. Oh, no. To the contrary, my friends. Most people are lazy, apathetic, boring, safe-thinking comfort seekers looking for a paycheck and a bag of Doritos. I know nobody on here is that way, but that's the bulk of people out there. Mediocre at best. But I believe it's only because that's what their programming has taught them. Maybe their upbringing, maybe society, maybe their world has beat them down. And again, they stop asking the questions. They learn to just be okay with what they have. Teach somebody how to do, be, and experience more, and you unleash potential unknown and unseen by those who knew them previously. And I know this to be a fact, my friends, because I've been practicing and developing on this form of leadership and training for almost 30 years now. And I had my own personal development labs, if you will, with my Aikido and Zen Center, my family's companies, the Ghetto Grocery Store and the mechanical contracting businesses, and my appraisal firms over the years. I've had the awesome opportunity of testing out these theories, these practices, these concepts with literally thousands of people over a 30-year period. At my dojo alone, we would have 10 to 20 new members coming in every single month from our marketing. Of course, people would leave and fall out. It's the normal attrition that happens, the turnover. But if you just add that up, 10 to 20 people is 150 to 240 people a year over a 20-plus year period. It's thousands and thousands of people to practice leadership on. There are dozens of businesses and people in the world today that I can honestly and proudly say have a direct link back to my dojo, back to our companies and our leadership training, that again, I can proudly say we helped get there. Now, of course, some of them could be considered direct competitors of mine, but of course, I don't see things that way. Many have gone on to start businesses in other towns, other states, some of them in other countries, Australia, Japan, Poland, all around the world. And of course, there are many, many more that aren't in business, but would credit their time in the dojo or having gone through some of our leadership and personal development trainings and mentorship programs, who would simply say life is better because of the growth that they initiated themselves. Now, lest you think I'm taking credit for all of this, I'm not. One of the principles of servant leadership is that you don't take credit for others' successes because it's truly them. It's they who created and developed it. We just helped them take off the mental shackles, if you will. Again, the law of the onion. We helped peel back the layers that even they couldn't see to reveal the leader within them. We maybe help them realize that they could do, be, and have more, and they chose to move in that direction. And I know this to be the case because out of the thousands who have come through my dojo or my businesses over the years, the sheer numbers show that an extreme minority actually use the concepts to grow. I know this. Very few will actually take your advice. Most never overcome their programmed complacency, we'll call it, or really ever have the desire to be more than, again, comfort-seeking. This is okay, by the way. Many of those people will simply go on to say that they're better for having crossed paths with you. And in my opinion, this should be the goal of every servant leader. Last week, we asked some questions, as I mentioned earlier, of our businesses. One of those questions was, will they miss me when I'm gone? This was a test. If I'm doing everything right, I'm becoming a resource in my market and in my business, and I stop, will they miss me when I'm gone? If the answer is no, that I'm just a commodity, well, then we need to ask better questions and learn how to become a valued and valuable resource in our market. Until we can answer, yes, they will miss me when I'm gone, not just because of the quality of the work I do, but the quality of the experience they get. Now, this week, we ask the question of every person we come in contact with. I'm imploring you, the listener. Every person you come in contact with, ask this question. You ask it in your head. You don't have to ask them verbally. How can I make them better for having crossed my path? How can I give to them in a way that makes some kind of difference, however great or small? Now, of course, it could be simply letting someone cut in line at Starbucks and giving them a smile or a positive comment. It could be paying for the person behind you in line at McDonald's in the drive-thru and then telling the server at the window, hey, tell them I paid for it, and encourage them to pay it forward and pay for somebody else. It could be putting aside your own needs, your own wishes, your own cares, concerns, and desires to help another person reach theirs. Now, I know a lot of you do. You donate time to charities and things like that, which is a great, great thing. To make one's own desires and needs subordinate to another human being means to detach from the desire for personal gain and recognition. You're not doing it for personal gain. You're not doing it for recognition. And it's only from this place of no ego and a desire to help, and from expanded awareness, as well as putting somebody else's needs above one's own, that real growth occurs. The ego almost always gets in the way of things. I've talked about this before. Our ego gets in the way. And it makes judgments about the way things should or shouldn't be, and that can cloud one's ability to really take in new information and grow from it. I don't need to remind all of you that we live in a world where selfies, where trying to impress the world with our fake snapshots, showing the whole world what we had for dinner or how special our kids are, has become the thing to do. It's a world all about us. It's a narcissistic world. It's making the rest of the world believe that we're more special than we are, and it's also trying to present a view to the world that doesn't actually exist. And it takes a special strength, by the way, to stay detached from all of this and to focus on the growth of others. In essence, we need to redefine every definition of success that we may have in our head, from one based maybe in numbers, maybe appraisal orders, loans closed, real estate side successfully completed, to one of how many others you've helped reach their goals and potential, even if it costs you. Every relationship can't be transactional. Look for ways to help others that have no way to help you back, and then you know you're on the right track. Look for ways to help others grow, even if it means you potentially helping a competitor. And when you start to think like this, you eliminate competition from your life. With it goes stress. That's stress anyway. You eliminate competition from your business, and you start to build let's call it a karmic army, if you will, of energy that somehow, some way always comes back to you multiplied. If you don't like the word karma for some reason, just think of it as the law of action and reaction. What goes out must come back. And when you're working to help others, you're building on this law. You're putting energy out into the world that has to come back to you. And by the way, it always comes back multiplied. This goes for the good and the bad. What you put out to the world always comes back multiplied. Whether you believe it or not, it's like gravity. You don't have to believe in gravity, but go ahead, jump out of the window. This law is universal. It goes for the bad just as it does for the good. It goes for the negative just as it does for the positive energy. It's simply a universal law, my friends. And as the great Zig Ziglar always said, you can have anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get theirs. Now, I personally would change this sentiment. I would change the quote just a bit because I think Zig was just a tad off in this regard. His version of the quote makes it sound, to me, transactional. And that you'll get if you would just give. He said, you can have anything in life that you want as long as you help, he said it in his southern drawl, as long as you help enough other people get theirs. But to me, that sounds transactional. What I would say, I would change Zig's quote, is that it is a far higher goal to simply help enough other people reach their goals. Just stop there. No need to go on. You don't have to say you can have as much as you want as long as you help enough other people. No, just say, help enough other people reach their goals. Stop. Done. It doesn't matter if you have goals of your own or if you want something. Expect nothing in return and simply do it because you can. So in essence, I would break Zig Ziglar's quote into two separate quotes. The first part, you can have anything you want in life, period. Yep, I would stop there. Because I believe that, and I will tell you all this. You can have anything you want in life. Period, full stop. And then the second part of the quote, it's a totally separate quote now from Blaine, not Zig. Help enough other people get theirs. One may affect the other, but it shouldn't be the goal or the intention for helping others. Helping others is the goal in and of itself. Servant leadership, my friends, study it, become it. Start transmitting it in everything you do. I want to thank you again for being part of the Real Value Podcast and the Real Value Syndicate, my friends, and for spending your most valuable currency with me, and that is your time. I will do everything I can to create a return on your investment, but ultimately, it's up to you with what you do with the information that just entered your ears and hopefully your heart today. Go out into the world, create some value for those around you with no expectation of return, and see what it does in your life. I love you all, and I seriously look forward to hanging with you again next week. Make it the best week you've had since last week. I am out.